Ancient giant skeletons mystery. 18 giant strange skeletons found in Wisconsin. Sons of God, men of renown, the Genesis giants as we know them. This is another take on the forbidden archaeology and forbidden history, but there are people who love archaeology and history and want to know the truth. Scientists are remaining stubbornly silent about the lost race of giants found in burial mounds all over the United States. They're all over the world for that matter, but in this section of videos we're talking about the giants of the United States found in burial mounds near Lake Delavan, Wisconsin, specifically May 1912. The dig site at Lake Delavan was overseen by Beloit College. It included more than 200 effigy mounds. These were all burial mounds that proved to be classic examples of 8th century woodland culture, but the enormous size of the skeletons and elongated skulls as well, found in May of 1912, did not fit neatly into anyone's concept of a textbook standard. They were enormous. They were not even average human beings. Strange skulls that these giants had, first reported in May 4th, 1912, issue of New York Times. The 18 skeletons found by the Peterson brothers on Lake Lawn Farm, southwest Wisconsin, exhibited several strange, freakish features. Their heights ranged between 7.5 feet to 10 feet tall, and their skulls, presumably those of men, they looked humanoid that is, are much larger than the heads of any race which inhabit America today, they said. They tend to have a double row of teeth, 6 fingers, 6 toes, and like humans came in different races. The teeth in front of the jaw are regular molars. Heads usually found are elongated, believed due to longer than normal lifespan. Quote, one must wonder, how much can they lift if twice the size of an average human today? Are these the giants of the Bible and many other civilizations that are in the history and painted on their walls? The Bible in Genesis 6:4 says, there were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came into the daughters of men, and they bare children to them. The same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. End quote. Now they were saying this actually, this is not a good translation in English. Men of renown being that they were famous for their evil acts of evil. They were of the bad generation. They mixed with man. They were not supposed to mix with man. Man was supposed to mix with man, not with anything else. Each to its own seed. Now going back to the article. Now this is a faulty logic to any scientists out there because we're using religious cultural history to fill a hole in science. Nevertheless, it was written in the Holy Bible, and we have to take that into account, that it was recorded as a historical fact that in the ancient times, yes, giants roamed the earth, and they were not of God's liking. Over 200 giant digs in the United States found in recent years. Giant skeletons finds have not made the local or national news since the 1950s. For the most part, it seems most people's opinions due to the fear that people would question evolution, if anything, a devolution. In 2002, National Geographic reported a dozen Cyclops skeletons were found in Greece that stood 12 to 15.5 feet tall. That is 3 humans in height. They only had one eye socket. Well, we all know that the ancient Greek mythology talked about Cyclops, the giants with one eye in the middle of their forehead. And now we find that the National Geographic in 2002 reported 12 Cyclops, a dozen Cyclops skeletons were found in Greece, standing 12 to 15.5 feet tall. Giants in history are typically cannibalistic in nature. The reason why we have to bring this up is to tie into politics the word happenings. And we look at Greek mythology talking about war with Cyclops, learning that they had to bring down by taking out their legs, rendering them slow and helpless. Now, for the American giants, the red-haired giants were found with Egyptian writings on their tombs that have been found in multiple locations. If you look back at my post yesterday, we did go into the fact that the Grand Canyon and Ohio and Illinois have a tremendous amount of Egyptian hieroglyphics and Egyptian type of pyramids, pyramidal structures. So yes, we did have evidence of Egyptian hieroglyphics in the United States. The mystery now of the Wisconsin giants. Was this some sort of prank or a hoax played by local farm boys or a demented taxidermist for fun in order to get the attention of the press? Well, the answer is no. The Lake Delavan find of May 1912 was only one of a dozen and dozens of similar finds all over the United States and were reported in local newspapers from 1851 forward to the present day. It's not even the first set of giant skeletons found in Wisconsin. On the 10th of August of 1891, the New York Times reported that scientists from the Smithsonian Institute discovered many large pyramidal monuments on Lake Mills near Madison, Wisconsin. Madison was in ancient days the center of a teeming population numbering about 200,000 people. The excavators found an elaborate system of defense works which they named Fort Aztalan. The Times said, "The celebrated mounds of Ohio and Indiana can bear no comparison, either in size, design, or the skill displayed in their construction with these gigantic and mysterious monuments of earth, erected we know not by whom, and for what purpose we can only conjecture." End quote. Well, we know that most of these were, of course, burial mounds. One of the ones that we have here, and I pass very often, is the burial mound of the Athenian warriors who fought against the Persians in the Battle of Marathon. You know the marathon, as in the marathon run, the 40-kilometer run? Yes, that is a burial mound as well. Now, on December 20th, 1897, the Times followed up with a report on 3 large burial mounds that had been discovered in Maple Creek, Wisconsin, and one had recently been opened, that is, at that time, in 1897. Quote, "In it was found the skeleton of a man of gigantic size. The bones measured from head to foot over 9 feet and were in a fair state of preservation. The skull was as large as a half-bushel measure. Some finely tempered rods of copper and other relics were lying near the bones." End quote. Giant skulls and skeletons of a race of Goliaths have been found on a very regular basis throughout the Midwestern states for more than 100 years. Giants have been found in Minnesota, Iowa, Illinois, Ohio, Kentucky, New York, and of course the Grand Canyon. And they're basically they had their colonies, their areas, their residences all along the Mississippi River. So it's basically all of the Midland of the United States. Now, their burial sites are similar to the well-known mounds of the mound-builder people. The spectrum of mound-builder history spans a period of more than 5,000 years, thus starting at least from 3,400 BC, a period greater than the history of ancient Egypt and all of its dynasties. So these areas and mounds, and of course the even older Egyptian pyramid-like structures we found, and we talked about yesterday in yesterday's post concerning the Grand Canyon pyramids, are much older. Now these here are the newer ones. They're at least 5,000 years old, and they're much older than the Egyptian pyramids. There is a prevailing scholarly consensus that we have an adequate historical understanding of the peoples who lived in North America during this period. The long record of anomalous finds, however, like those at Lake Delavan, suggest otherwise. There is also a huge cover-up taking place. There was, from that time, the Great Smithsonian cover-up. Has there been a giant cover-up? Why aren't the public displays of gigantic Native American skeletons at the Natural History Museums? Well, they are on display in Ecuador. I just posted another video today. Earlier today, you'll see that, the giants of Ecuador. They are on display in Ecuador. Giants have been found in Greece, where I live at this time. Giants have been found. Huge giants, cyclops as well. They have been quickly whisked away, never to be seen again. Unfortunately, there are people still alive today who are witnessing as to the areas where they found them, and that they were taken away very quickly by people in black, as we would say, men in black, and never to be seen again. As to where they went, no one knows. So this is happening worldwide, no doubt. Now, the skeletons of the Native Americans and of some mound builders are certainly on display, but they're regular sized people. There's a wonderful exhibit in the Aztalan State Park where one may see the skeleton of the princess of Aztalan in the museum. But the skeletons placed on display are normal sized, and according to some sources, the skeletons of giants have been covered up, specifically by the Smithsonian Institution. It has been accused of making a deliberate effort to hide the telling of the bones and to keep the giant skeletons locked away. In the words of Vin Deloria, a Native American author and professor of law, he says, "Modern-day archaeology and anthropology have nearly sealed the door on our imaginations, broadly interpreting the North American past as devoid of anything unusual in a way of great cultures, characterized by people of unusual demeanor. The great interloper of ancient burial grounds, the 19th century Smithsonian Institution, created a one-way portal through which uncounted bones have been spirited. This door and the contents of its vault are virtually sealed off to anyone but government officials. Among these bones may lay answers not even sought by these officials concerning the deep past." Now, there were 2 giant skeletons near Potosi, Wisconsin, reported January 13th of 1870. Wisconsin mound opened. Skeleton found of a man over 9 feet tall with an enormous skull. So, we have this, January 13th, 1870. The Wisconsin Decatur Republican reported that 2 giant, well-preserved skeletons of an unknown race of person, of humanoid, were discovered near Potosi, Wisconsin. Unknown race. By workers digging the foundation of a small mill near the bank of the Mississippi River. One skeleton measured 7.5 feet and the other 8 feet. The skeletons of each had prominent cheekbones and double rows of teeth. Here we go again with the double rows of teeth. They 6 fingers, 6 toes. A large collection of arrowheads and strange toys were found buried with the remains. Why would they put in toys? Perhaps these skeletons of 7.5 to 8 feet were only children. Giant skeleton discovered in Maple Creek, Wisconsin, December 20th, 1897. The New York Times reported that 3 large burial mounds had been discovered near Maple Creek, Wisconsin, and upon excavation, a skeleton measuring over 9 feet from head to toe was discovered with finely tapered copper rods and other relics. Giant skeleton in West Bend, Wisconsin, unearthed outside of West Bend near Lizard Mound County Park, assembled by local farmers to a height of 8 feet. And more of this can be found in the Washington County Paranormal, a Wisconsin legend trip by local author and investigator J. Nathan Coach. As normal-sized skeletons of a supposed mound builder, the princess of Aztalan, is on display at the site of several large pyramid monuments near Madison called Aztalan State Park, the Goliath remains of Wisconsin's giants have vanished along with hundreds of others discovered throughout the Midwest, and many have accused the Smithsonian Institute of covering up these discoveries, locking the giant skeletons away, depriving the public of their findings. I'll leave links below for you for this on SOTNet and Everything Press. Ancient giant skeletons found. An unknown tribe of giants lived in Wisconsin. Their heights ranged from about 8 feet, and their skulls, presumably those of men, are much larger than heads of any race which inhabited America today. This is what the reports reported back in 1912. New York Times article, May 4th, 1912. They tend to have a double row of teeth, 6 fingers and 6 toes, and like humans came in different races. The teeth in the front of the jaw are regular molars. Heads usually found are elongated, believed due to longer than normal lifespan. This is what the May 4th, 1912 issue of New York Times reported. The truth is that many ancient cultures around the globe firmly believed giants were real, and numerous ancient texts like the Bible, for example, suggest these mythological beings were real. They were called Nephilim. They were giants. They were giants in the earth in those days, and also after that, when the sons of God came in unto the daughters of men, and they bare children to them, the same became mighty men which were of old, men of renown. This is Genesis chapter 6, verse 4. And sensational claims required sensational evidence. In the words of Vine Deloria, a Native American author and professor of law, quote, modern day archaeology and anthropology have nearly sealed the door on our imaginations, broadly interpreting the North American past as devoid of anything unusual in the way of great cultures characterized by people of unusual demeanor. The great interloper of ancient burial grounds, the 19th century Smithsonian Institution created a one-way portal through which uncounted bones have been spirited away. This door and the contents of its vault are virtually sealed off to anyone but government officials. In this composite picture of the giant, on the top right-hand side, you see the young Queen Elizabeth of England observing the skeleton of one of these giants on display. Of course, these were not to be seen by anybody. These were displayed to elite people. Among these bones may lay answers not even sought by these officials concerning the deep past. Archaeological examination near Lake Delavan in Wisconsin had found skeletons of extraordinary dimensions. In other words, they were ancient giants. The article stated, May 3rd, strange skeletons found, indication that tribe hitherto unknown once lived in Wisconsin. Special to the New York Times, Madison, Wisconsin, May 3rd, the discovery of several skeletons of human beings while excavating a mound at Lake Delavan indicates that a hereto unforetold, unknown race of men once inhabited southern Wisconsin. Information of the discovery was brought to Madison today by Maurice Morrissey of Delavan, who came here to attend a meeting of the Republican State Central Committee. Curator Charles Brown of the State Historical Museum will investigate the discoveries within a few days. Upon opening one large mound at Lake Lawn Farm, 18 skeletons were discovered by the Phillips brothers. The heads, presumably those of men, are much larger than the heads of any race which inhabit America today. From directly over the eye sockets, the head slopes straight back, and the nasal bones protrude far above the cheekbones. The jaw bones are long and pointed, bearing a minute resemblance to the head of a monkey. The teeth in the front of the jaw are regular molars. There were also found in the mounds the skeletons presumably of women, which had smaller heads but were similar in facial characteristics. The skeletons were embedded in charcoal and covered over with layers of baked clay to shed water from the sepulchre. That was the article from New York Times published May 4th, 1912. The heads were elongated, larger than normal. According to News of the Times, the skeletons found by a group of archaeologists of the University Beloit College of Wisconsin measured about 3 meters, that's about 9 feet. These were just some of the many skeletons that were discovered around the earth. But the mystery started after the discovery was made, as nothing more was known about the skeletons. Where did the skeletons end up? Were they deliberately hidden from the public? And the answer to that is, of course, yes. Interestingly, the area where the giant skeletons were found is known for giant-sized skeletons which do not seem to correspond to the characteristics of ordinary people or the Native Americans of that area. I'll leave a link below for you for this on Lawclip. An ancient civilization has been found beneath Death Valley, and mummified giants of the Paiute tribes. Traces of giants found in the desert. In 1947, a retired Ohio doctor allegedly discovered relics of an ancient civilization whose men averaged 8 to 9 feet tall in the Colorado Desert near the Arizona-Nevada-California line. Howard E. Hill of Los Angeles disclosed that several well-preserved mummies were taken from caverns in an area roughly 180 miles square, extending through much of southern Nevada. Hill said the discoverer is Dr. F. Bruce Russell, a retired Cincinnati physician who stumbled on the first of several tunnels in 1931. Not until recently, however, did Dr. Russell go into the situation thoroughly, Hill told The Luncheon. With Dr. Daniel S. Bovee of Los Angeles, Dr. Russell has found mummified remains together with implements of the civilization, which Dr. Bovee had tentatively placed at about 80,000 years old. Quote, "These giants are clothed in garments consisting of a medium-length jacket and trousers extending slightly below the knees. The texture of the material is said to resemble gray dyed sheepskin, but obviously it was taken from an animal unknown today." End quote. In another cavern was found the ritual hall with devices and markings similar to those now used by the Masons. The Freemasons, that is. So far, Hill added, no women have been found. He said the explorers believe they found the burial place of the tribe's hierarchy. Hieroglyphs are chiseled, he added, on carefully polished granite. He said Dr. Viola Petit of London, who made excavations around Petra in the Arabian Desert, soon will begin an inspection of these remains. This was originally reported 1947 by the San Diego Union, recounted in Atlantis Rising, January to February 2002. San Antonio Express article relates how giant skulls were unearthed. Huge skulls, at least twice the size of today's normal human skull. Beach giant skull unearthed by WPA workers near Victoria, believed to be the largest ever found in the world. Normal head also found. They were found together. So these people, these giants, lived together with normal-sized humans. Giant skull believed to be possibly the largest found in the world, and the human skull shown on the right was recently unearthed in Victoria County by Texas University anthropologists, and the other two are of normal size. We've been lucky enough to find an image, one of the few images that is to be found on the internet, from a 19th century newspaper article. The photograph is clear enough to make out the fact that it's a giant exhumed body from 1869. It's a black and white photograph. One of the earliest photographs, I guess, that were taken at that time is pretty clear. 19th century newspaper reports most giant skeletons mentioned in the clips were dug from the mounds found all over the southeastern United States. The old news items often labeled them Indian skeletons, but it's obvious that these belonged actually to the mound culture people, the mound builders, who were living in the United States long before the Indians arrived. The Indians claimed that the mound builders, the mounds were already there. The old news item often labeled the Indian skeletons, but it's obvious that these belonged to the mound culture people who were living in the United States long before the Indians ever arrived there. Giant skeletons unearthed at Athens, Georgia, thought to have been Indians of gigantic proportions. The skeletons of two Indians, they claim it's Indians, basically they have been found to be red-haired Caucasians, but this is what the article says. The skeleton of two Indians have been unearthed along the banks of Hocking River at Roach's Mill, 1/2 mile east of Athens. The excavation was made under a large building a short distance from the bank of the river. Unearthed a few feet from the skeletons were many arrowheads, which no doubt were buried with the redskins when they were sent either by accident or natural death to the happy hunting grounds. The skeletons were eventually those of gigantic men. Judging by the bones, they could not have measured less than 7 feet in stature. The bones were in an excellent state of preservation, the teeth being still firmly embedded in the maxillary bones. We have to keep in mind that in about the mid-18th century, people were a lot shorter than they are today. I mean, they could have been somewhere between 4.5 to 5 feet tall was the average. Some of the interesting characteristics of these giant skeletons is that they were often red-haired, and often their foreheads slanted backwards immediately above the eye ridge, as the following skull found in Lovelock in Nevada, Lovelock Cave. Someone did take an image in order to preserve what the skull looked like. Many other bones were spirited away or destroyed by Darwinian marauders, who knows. The giant skeletons were often immediately turned over to the archaeological authorities, either to the local state natural museum, but often directly to the experts from the Smithsonian Institute in Washington. The skeletons, bones, and skulls were then taken away, yet strangely the Smithsonian nor the Natural State Museums have no record nor any exhibits of giant skeletons today or even yesterday. Is that why this curator is smiling like a Cheshire cat? In other words, they took these giant skeletons and hid them somewhere if they did not destroy them. So it's shameful. It's this shameful suppression of pertinent information having to do with the American Archaeology, Ancient America, historic academic institutions all over America and Western countries as well, find this to be scandalous. Thus far, never exposed to the mainstream media, which ought to jolt the conscience of every true historian to wake them up out of their quackademic slumber and innate trust in these self-proclaimed false authorities who have taken advantage of their gullibility to suppress true history almost 150 years in order to promote a false agenda for obvious reasons. Now, they're also in the New York Times of 1902 reports 12-foot tall giants in Guadalupe in Mexico. Los Angeles, February 10th. Owing to the discovery of the remains of a race of giants in Guadalupe, New Mexico, antiquarians and archaeologists are preparing an expedition further to explore that region. This determination is based on the excitement that exists among people of the scope of country near Mesa Rico, about 20 miles southeast of Los Angeles, where an old burial ground has been discovered that has yielded skeletons of enormous size. Luciana Quintana, on whose ranch the ancient burial plot is located, discovered 2 stones that bore curious inscriptions, and beneath these were found in shallow excavations the bones of a frame that could not have been less than 12 feet in length. The men who opened the grave say the forearm was 4 feet long, and that a well-preserved jaw and lower teeth range from the size of a hickory nut to that of the largest walnut in size. The chest of the beings reported as having a circumference of 7 feet. Quintana, who has uncovered many other burial places, expresses the opinion that perhaps thousands of skeletons of a race of giants long extinct will be found. This supposition is based on the traditions handed down from the early Spanish invasion that have detailed knowledge of the existence of a race of giants that inhabited the plains of what now is eastern New Mexico. Indian legends and carvings also in the same section indicate the existence of such a race of giants. This is an article on the New York Times, published February 11th, 1902. Now, we have such giants found all over the United States and Canada and Mexico, and all over the world, in fact. But we're talking now about the ones that have been found beneath Death Valley, this ancient civilization found there. Another old mystery of ancient civilizations unsolved in Death Valley, which may conceal underground cities that were described in Paiute Indian legend. The city apparently was first described 68 years ago in Burke Lee's books, Death Valley Men. In the book chapter Old Gold, Burke Lee describes a conversation which he had several years ago with a small group of Death Valley residents. At one point, 2 of the men, Jack and Bill, described their experience with an underground city which they claimed to have discovered in 1931 after one of them had fallen through the bottom of an old mine shaft near Wingate Pass. Besides, they claimed to have discovered preserved mummies of a race of men 8 to 9 feet tall in several caverns which they have followed about 20 miles north into the heart of the Pennant Mountains. Evidence of the lost civilization in Death Valley, in these mountains, the Pennant Mountains, came in a bizarre report of caves and mummies in Hot Citizen, a Nevada paper in August 5th, 1947. And these are some of the highlights from that article. A band of amateur archaeologists announced today they have discovered a lost civilization of men 9 feet tall in Californian caverns. Howard E. Hill, spokesman for the expedition, said the civilization may be the fabled lost continent of Atlantis. The caves contain mummies of men and animals and implements of a culture 80,000 years old, but more advanced than ours. One cavern contained their ritual hall with devices and markings similar to the Masonic order. A long tunnel from this ritual temple hall took the party into a room where well-preserved remains of dinosaurs, saber-toothed tigers, imperial elephants, and other extinct beasts were paired off in niches as of on display. The 32 caves covered a 180 square mile area in California's Death Valley and southern Nevada. According to Howard E. Hill, some catastrophe apparently drove the people into the caves. They went into the caves to protect themselves, obviously. So I'll leave a link below for you for all these. This is something that I find fascinating. There's too little work done concerning American archaeology, and it seems that a lot of these mummies and even the pyramids, the Grand Canyon pyramids and Death Valley areas, are found to be older than the pyramids of Egypt. So and even bigger. So there's a lot of interesting information to be found, and as I find it, I will be posting videos for you who are interested in this. This is on UFO sightings and other links, and I'll leave links below for you in the description box. Giants of North America. The Adena Giants revealed. Profile of the prehistoric mound builders, or the Paleo Indians. They have been found all over the United States and Canada. These are mounds that were actually tombs, burial mounds of these ancient giants, and their skeletons are and were to be found there. In the 1800s, reports began to surface of the discovery of very large human skeleton remains in the burial mounds of North America. These skeletons were described as reaching 7 to 8 feet in height, with a lower frequency of discovery spanning 9 to 11 feet in length, having very large skulls and gigantic lower jaw bones. Historians many times detail these remains in earlier local historical records, such as this one from the Cass County in Michigan. Quote, "It was a mound about 13 feet high, the diameter of its base about 50 feet. Portions of the skeletons were in good state of preservation. The femur or the thigh bone of one of the males, which Dr. Bonine has now in his possession, is of great size and indicates that its owner must have been at least 7 feet in height." End quote. This was from Alfred Matthews' History of Cass County, Michigan, dated 1882. The Creole Mound in South Charleston, West Virginia, 35 foot in height and 175 feet in diameter, of a conical mound. It's the second largest of this type in West Virginia. Accounts of exceptional burial mounds. Antiquarians also wrote about the anthropology of all these tall giant skeletons, these tall beings in prehistoric mounds. This is an account from Chillicothe, Illinois, from American Antiquarian Volume 2, Number 1, dated in 1879. Quote, "A recent exploration of a mound near this place resulted in some interesting discoveries. The form was large, the jaws massive, and the teeth perfect. As is well known, 19th and early 20th century newspapers frequently ran stories of gigantic skeletons found throughout the country. This report from Portsmouth, Ohio, was run by the News Herald, January 3rd, 1895. Quote, "Bridge carpenters on the North and West Railroad found a gigantic skeleton while excavating 3 miles east of Portsmouth a few days ago. The skeleton measured 7 feet 4 inches." End quote. In the 1880s, the Eastern Mound Division of the Smithsonian discovered a number of gigantic skeletons in their wanton destruction of North American tumuli, the tumuli meaning the tumulus, these were the actual burial tombs. The burial mounds are called tumulus. The 12th annual report of the Bureau of Ethnology documents numerous gigantic skeletons found by Smithsonian agents. Quote, near the original surface of the mound, lying at full length upon its back, was one of the largest skeletons discovered by the Bureau agents, the length, as proved by actual measurements, being between 7 and 8 feet. In the center of the mound, of Mound 11, 3 feet below the surface, was a vault 8 feet long and 3 feet wide. In the bottom of this lay a skeleton fully 7 feet long. The length from the base of the skull to the bone of the toes was found to be 7 feet 3 inches. It is probable, therefore, that this individual, when living, was 7.5 feet high. Extraordinary skeletal features. The 20th century saw the rediscovery of the ancient giants by mainstream archaeologists working with Charles Snow, William S. Webb of the University of Kentucky, positively identified the unique skeletal features noted by the early sources with the people of the Adena mound-building culture. Webb and Snow's analysis of the anthropology of Adena was described in the Adena People number 1, 1945, and number 2, co-written with Raymond S. Babby, 1957. Quote, the forehead is typically a prominent one, bordered below by fairly prominent brow ridges. The characteristic bulge of the upper and lower jaws, alveolar prognathism, is moderate in projection. Usually the cheekbones are not only of large size in themselves, but they have a forward and lateral prominence. This is what is written in Webb, Snow, and Babby, 1957. In addition to these strong features, Webb, Snow, and Babby, 1957, remarked upon the, quote, great width of the bony chin formed by bilateral eminences, end quote. The typical Adena crania were extremely high vaulted, brachycephalic. Approximately 89% of the adult males and 92% of the adult females are brachycephalic. This is what Webb and Snow wrote in 1945. In their report on the Dover Mound in Kentucky, Webb and Snow noted that the Adena crania to represent the, quote, highest skull vaults reported anywhere in the world, end quote. Webb and Snow, the Dover Mound, 1959. Cephalic indices measured for Adena range from 89 to 100. The Adena people practiced artificial flattening of the occipital region, which added height to the cranial vault. This practice merely enhanced congenital features. Quote, those skulls with slight or no deformation, undeformed, present similar proportions, end quote. It is likely that many, if not most, of the skull characteristics so typical of Adena are of genetic nature, end quote. Webb, Snow, and Babby wrote in 1957. The Wolf Plains Group, a late Adena group of 30 earthworks including 22 conical mounds and 9 circular enclosures located a few miles to the northwest of Athens, Ohio, USA. Beings of very large proportions. At the Dover Mound, Webb encountered a 7-foot, 2-meter tall skeleton with these notable Adena features. Burial 40, quote, the remains of Burial 40 is one of the largest known to Adena. The skull foot field measures 84 inches, that's 7 feet. In 1958, Don Dragoo of the Carnegie Museum uncovered the remains of an individual, quote, of large proportions, end quote, in the subsurface tomb at the lowest strata of the Cresap Mound in West Virginia. Burial 54 is described by Drago in Mounds for the Dead. Quote, when measured in the tomb, his height was approximately 7.04 feet. All the long bones were heavy and possessed marked eminences for the attachment of muscles, end quote. Drago described the unique traits of Adena including the, quote, protruding and massive chin, and, quote, with, quote, prominent bilateral protrusions as well as individuals approaching 7 feet in height, end quote. It's important to note that in considering this information from Webb, Snow, and Dragoo, regularly occurring gigantic members were not the only unique features of the Adena people. Quote, not only were these Adena people tall, but also the massiveness of those bones indicates powerfully built individuals. The head was generally big with a large cranial capacity, end quote. Dragoo, 1963. Setting the standard for giantology. Working in the 20th century, Webb, Snow, and Dragoo essentially corroborated the findings of the earlier antiquarians and linked the gigantic skeleton types with a specific culture. After this, the pioneering research of Ross Hamilton and the late Vine Deloria set a scholarly standard for giantology, synchronizing the native and archaeological records in Hamilton's unsurpassed work, quote, a tradition of giants. And yet, in spite of the tradition of rediscovery, no satisfactory reconstruction of an Adena giant has ever been undertaken. While we're routinely reminded of the dimensions of the giants in volumes, reprinting multiple hundreds of accounts of their discovery, we've been denied imagery representing their living form. While numerous other anomalies, such as the Paracas and the Star Child crania, have received due attention, the gigantic Adena have remained shrouded in mystery. In May of 2015, the authors undertook a joint venture with the legendary Marcia Moore to remedy this. Artist fills in gaps in hidden history. Marcia is best known as the premier artist recreating the living images of the elongated crania of Peru associated with the Paracas people. Her work has appeared in the books of Brian Forrester and L.A. Mazzulli and has been featured on the Ancient Aliens TV series, with Marcia herself occasionally appearing in the show, Ancient Aliens and Alien Evolution. The skull used for the Adena creation was that of Burial 16 from the Wright Mounds in Kentucky, photographed in figure 25 of the Adena people number 1, where it's described as showing pronounced deformation in skeletal material from the Wright site, Montgomery County, Kentucky, 1940. Hertzberg noted that the crania of the Wright site featured the large prognathic lower mandibles, or protruding lower jaw, typical of Adena, and although artificially deformed, the series demonstrates the large congenital features detailed by Webb, Snow, and Dragoo. Quote, deformed as they are, these crania display pronounced brachiocranii. It may be noticed that 4 skulls displaying submedium deformation also give an average cranial index of 90%. Thus, the inference is that these people would have shown pronounced brachiocranii even without deformation. The dimensions of the Adena giant were derived from several sources with corroborating details. Among these, the authors referenced the handwritten field notebook of P.W. Norris, the agent of the Bureau of Ethnology, who excavated the Adena mounds at Charleston, West Virginia in 1883 and 84. Smithsonian manuscript Norris Mound Excavations. Several mounds at Charleston yielded skeletons 7 feet long. At the Great Smith Mound, Norris encountered a house-like timber structure 12 by 13 feet broad and 6 feet high, reaching 10 feet at the ridged top. Within the structure was a gigantic and prominent personage surrounded by 5 of his, probably volunteer, warriors. Norris measured the central burial in situ and described it as a, quote, gigantic human skeleton, 7 feet 6 inches in length and 19 inches between the shoulders. Elsewhere in the manuscript, the skeleton is regularly referred to as the giant or gigantic. Significantly, this particular burial was wrapped in bark and covered with a dry clay. This certainly suggests that the in situ measurements would have been accurate rather than the product of some type of disarticulation due to the weight of the mound mass, as mainstream sources often claim. The measurements provided by Norris are similar to those from other sources, including this account of the gigantic specimen unearthed by Warren Moorhead in Ohio, documented in 1892. Quote, 6 feet above these remains was found the partial skeleton of a man almost a giant in size. The breadth across the shoulders with the bones correctly placed was 19 inches. We have to remember, in the late 18th century or the early mid-18th century, 19th century, people were a lot shorter than we are today. I remember when I had gone to visit the Mayflower, the reconstructed Mayflower in Boston, Massachusetts. This was way back when. They told us that the reconstructed ship was 25% bigger than the actual Mayflower. Well, I have to tell you, I'm 5'9". When I went there, I was still 5'9", even though I was a teenager. And we had to get into the ship and go down underneath the deck, crouched, because people at that time were quite short. I mean, I guess they were about 4 feet tall, 4.5 feet tall was an average height. So a person of 7 to 8 feet height was almost twice as tall as they were. That's also, the skeleton was a lot different. Their bones were heavier, their cranium and their jaws were protruding. They had a different type of a look. So now, going back to the article, quote, 6 feet above these remains was found a partial skeleton of a man almost a giant in size. The breadth across the shoulders with the bones correctly placed was 19 inches, end quote. The anthropological details of Edina, recorded by Webb, Snow, and Vergou and the early historians and antiquarians, corroborate Norris's account and indicate individuals approaching 8 feet in height. Since the high frequency of reports describe skeletons reaching this height, the data was used by Marcia to formulate the likely dimensions and appearance of an 8-foot-tall Edina in the flesh. This is where missing history comes to life. Marcia has done more than merely provide a visual for a tall member of prehistoric population. The Edina giant represents a truly unique form of humankind, which until now has only been suggested by the multitude of newspaper and historical accounts regularly reprinted in the Giantology marketplace. The recreation of a very large number of Webb, Snow, and Vergou's unique group of honored dead provides a glimpse into the distant past, a snapshot from beyond the veil pulled over history by the establishment a century ago. So Marcia is currently working with the authors on a book to be published in 2016, well, it was obviously, that will feature an extensive set of her recreations of Edina and Edina-like individuals from the burial mounds of North America and all around the world. This important visual work will accompany the presentation of 7,000 years of obfuscated world history. I'll leave links below for you for this on Wikipedia, the Creole Mound, the Edina, and on ancient origins. If you'd like to join me on my Patreon account, you will hear content not covered by mainstream media. These riveting stories will be based on my research, and I will state my opinions and give my personal insight on diverse and controversial subjects and world events not covered by mainstream media, and not supported by YouTube guidelines. So whatever I have on my Patreon, most of those will not be on my YouTube channel. Please consider becoming a member today. More of the most significant and important videos will be on my Patreon channel. Your support helps me to continue my research and keeps this YouTube channel alive. And we depend on your support, your generous charity, because we help economically challenged families here in Athens, Greece, in Kapota, and we also help the young generation with university tuition and the community around our church. Thank you.